which you focused, as you've said, on burnout. So let's dive in a little bit. And how do we define it?
And this is perhaps the best kind of takeaway for people. Burnout, very simply put, is chronic stress.
Okay. Because I was going to ask you, what is the difference between burnout and stress? But maybe it's a question of degree, like pulling on an elastic band for a week and eventually it breaks. Something like that.
So there's a difference between acute stress, which when we say, oh, I'm so stressed out, we usually talk about it from an acute perspective. Like I got so much going on right now, or, I feel really stressed out because I'm in my car and I got to go to my appointment and I'm running late and there's a stupid guy in front of me and he's driving like 20 miles an hour. And so we feel stressed when there's this crunch, there's this pressure, when there's a lot of demands on us and we don't feel like we have the resources or the capacity to perform given our circumstances. That is how it starts. That's acute stress. And it's when those stressors keep showing up day after day that it's almost like an onion effect where they build one on top of the other. It could also be that you have stress coming in from all the different directions of your life. Like your relationship is rocky and, you're having a hard time with one of your kids, or your kid has special needs and that's really stressful. Or you just got a puppy, and you're going to train the puppy, or you just had a newborn and you're waking up in the middle of the night every 2 hours and you're not sleeping. So you're exhausted, right? There's so many different things that come into the mix about what makes us stressed. And sometimes it's like just the grind of day after day. And sometimes it's just the accumulation of things from all over the place that come together for the perfect storm. And it becomes this more chronic picture of stress. And that's where we experience burnout, which is really like where we're breaking down, right? So whereas with acute stress, like if I'm stuck in traffic, I'm going to be stressed in that moment. But when I get out of the car and I finally made it to my appointment, I kind of forget about it. I'm over it. I don't take it on with me for the next week and tell everybody, oh my God, you can't believe what's going on in my life. Like we just forget about it. But with other things, we take it everywhere we go. And it's hard for us sometimes to disconnect from the stress. So a lot of the people that I work with will say how they can't turn work off at the end of the day. So it's hard for them to fall asleep. They're constantly thinking about what else they have to do. I had one guy who I talked to who said that he's planning a vacation for Christmas with his family. And I asked him, well, how does it feel when you think about the way that you have your vacation structured and everything? Imagine you take yourself through the next 8 days of your vacation, then you're right back to where you are right now, sitting in your office chair. How does it feel? And he's like, not great. And I was like, why? And he said, because number one, I have pre-planned too much. It's just overkill, right? So it's not relaxing. And number two is I'm going to be checking emails from 10 p.m. until 2 a.m. every single day. So I was like, well, that doesn't sound like a vacation at all. Right? But there's all these different ways that we think about what we have to do. And so we're putting ourselves in these situations where we're perhaps working too hard. We're not disconnecting enough. We're not recharging enough. And it doesn't give us the opportunity to get back to ourselves and to really live life, coming back to our point of lifestyle and all this kind of stuff. You value being responsible and doing a good job at work, but there's more to the equation than that. And I think a lot of us have lost sight of that, the rest of the equation.
I know you said there are so many directions you could go in when you were writing your book, and you've already mentioned quite a few that could contribute to a stressful situation. Sounds like you've got to take a really more holistic view of the things that are impacting on that.
100%. Actually, I have a podcast called Decode Your Burnout. And what I do there is I'll interview people about their burnout story. And then I'm basically there to listen for 3 contributing factors: their programming, So this is a lot of your subconscious beliefs that are driving your decisions. They're environmental stressors, which are the things that we're usually most aware of. So that's where people are complaining about their job, their boss, their industry, their husband, their wife, their kids, you know, all of these things. And then there's your, what I call your personality or your burnout profile, which is whether you're, as I call it, a thinker, a feeler, or a doer. And there's all different things that come along with each of those. And then based on what your burnout code is, we think about how to create more customized recovery solutions for you. So it's not a one size fits all. We really want to take into account like what is showing up for you so that we can custom tailor the approach that we're taking for your recovery. Because if you're burned out and I'm burned out, we might be burned out for very different reasons, and we got to work on very different things.
Yeah, that's terrific. I'd love to go through that a little bit in more detail, because personalizing approach to health in general is where we're all headed, hopefully. But at some point, and is it just a question of degree? It is burnout, and what are there features of burnout that go, yes, this person is burnt out? I know, you know, I've been reading about the work of Christina Maslach, who seems to be the world leader, you know, in putting present company aside, of course, a world leader on burnout. And they're kind of, there are some features of it that are quite unique.
Well, so I would say this. Yeah, Christina Maslach talks about burnout in, first of all, more of an organizational perspective. So she's really focused on what can organizations do to support their workers. So providing certain kinds of resources, and also using her measure to figure out if your people are burned out and how many of them are burned out and what kind of symptoms are showing up for them. So it's kind of like broad strokes, right? It's like, yes, 60% of your workforce is burned out. They are exhausted, they are cynical, and their productivity has gone down. Great. Now it's your job as an organization to do something about it. And actually, I'm glad you asked that, because I started doing research on burnout in 2018, which is pre-COVID. And at that time, there weren't a lot of books on the subject as there are now. And when I came across her work and some of the other people that were talking about burnout in that space at the time, I thought, well, what if I'm that person working in an organization that's burned out? Like, what if I'm one of those people taking the Maslach inventory, right? And I'm like, okay, I already know I'm burned out. Now what you're telling me is I got to sit around and wait for my organization to make some changes. We all know how quickly they move.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, that's actually pretty disempowering to me. And so I thought, well, I want to write a book that's for the professional so that they can actually think about what they can do to help themselves rather than sit around passively waiting and hoping that maybe their organization is going to do something about it.